Welcome back to Bite-Sized Bible Breakdowns. In this episode we take a closer look at three of the most important titles associated with Jesus: Messiah, Son of God, and Son of Man, and how later Christians came to interpret them. Why? Because when you go back to the original historical Hebrew contexts, these titles do not mean what later Christians believe them to be. Let's start with Messiah. Today, it's often treated as a single, clear concept, a divinely appointed Savior predicted throughout the Hebrew Bible and fulfilled in Jesus. But historically, that's not how it worked. As scholars like John J. Collins explain, there wasn't just one messianic expectation in ancient Judaism. There were several: a royal king from the line of David, a priestly leader, a prophetic figure, and a mysterious angelic warrior. These weren't interchangeable roles, they were distinct concepts that developed over centuries. The most common messianic expectation was for a Davidic king, a human ruler who would restore Israel politically and militarily. But Jesus clearly did not fit that model. He didn't lead a revolt, didn't establish a kingdom, and was executed by the Romans. That created a problem for his followers. As Bart Ehrman points out, the idea of a suffering or executed Messiah was never part of Jewish expectation. And scholars like E.P. Sanders and Bart Ehrman note that Jesus never claimed to be the Messiah in his public ministry. Instead, the title became more important after his death, when followers began reinterpreting his life through the lens of their belief that he still had a central role to play in God's plan. Next, the Son of God title. To modern ears, that sounds like a biological claim. However, in its original Jewish context, it most certainly did not mean that, in even the slightest way. As Sanders explains, Son of God was a flexible title. It could refer to kings, to the people of Israel as a whole, or to an especially righteous person, someone chosen by God for a significant purpose. It most certainly did not mean divine parentage. So, how and why did the title morph into the literal Son of God? The answer lies in cultural translation. The Gospels were written in Greek. In a world shaped by Greco-Roman mythology, where gods routinely had children with humans, of course the Son of God title was interpreted this way. Figures like Zeus and Perseus were part of the cultural background. So, when non-Jewish Christians unfamiliar with Jewish context encountered the phrase Son of God, many took it literally. Mythologist Joseph Campbell points out that in the Hebrew tradition, this literal interpretation would have been considered blasphemous. But as Christianity spread into the Greek-speaking world, that meaning shifted, dramatically. Over time, this transformed Jesus from a human messenger of God into God himself. Finally, Son of Man. This is the most complex, and arguably the most revealing, of the three titles. The phrase comes from the book of Daniel, where it describes a heavenly figure who arrives at the end of days to bring judgment and establish God's kingdom on earth. Ehrman points out what becomes blatantly obvious about this messianic expectation, as captured in the Lord's Prayer, "Thy kingdom come." Importantly, the Son of Man is distinct from God, and reflects earlier mythological Canaanite traditions, reappropriated in the book of Daniel, written roughly 2 centuries before Jesus. Scholars like Collins argue this figure likely represents the angelic being mentioned in the book of Daniel 12:1. At that time Michael, the great prince, the protector of your people, shall arise. There shall be a time of anguish such as has never occurred since nations first came into existence. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. Now here is the key detail. In the Gospels, Jesus sometimes speaks about the Son of Man as if it's someone else. For example, in Mark 8:38, he says, "Whoever is ashamed of me, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of them when he comes." Notice the distinction, me versus the Son of Man. And in Matthew 25, when the Son of Man comes in his glory. Not when I come but when the Son of Man comes. This suggests that Jesus wasn't identifying himself as this cosmic judge, but that Jesus was referring to God's general, the Archangel Michael, who would initiate the kingdom that Jesus preached in his end times ministry. According to Bart Ehrman, this distinction gradually blurred. After Jesus' death, his followers believed he had been exalted to heaven. Since he had preached about a coming judge, it became natural to identify Jesus with the Son of Man mentioned in Daniel. Over time, the message was conflated, and the various titles merged. So, when you put all three titles together, Messiah, Son of God, and Son of Man, you don't start with a single, unified identity. You get an identity that evolved over decades of misunderstanding Jewish meanings. What began as a Jewish apocalyptic preacher, announcing the imminent arrival of God's kingdom, was gradually reinterpreted through cultural lenses, Greek, Roman, and eventually fully Christian. And in that process, the titles changed meaning. Thus, we get Ehrman's summation: Christianity is not the religion of Jesus. It's the religion about Jesus.
Thanks for watching. Please check out the other videos on my channel if history is your thing, and see you next time.